Yo, 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 new episode, and dude, we've got some crazy news to start it off. Juan Soto, a player that we've seen rumored around being moved for the last couple years. It seems official that he's going to be traded, whether that's at this deadline or in the offseason, but it looks like Juan Soto is going to be traded. Crazy news to start off the episode.
Absolutely, and I honestly have no clue where he's going to go, but I know the packages are going to look insane. I mean, it all started with around the All-Star break. We saw him get offered from the Nationals a $440 million extension for, I believe it was 14 years. So it was $30 million a year, which we all know annually he's probably worth more than that. But it's hard to turn down $440 million guaranteed dollars in your bank account. And it was just kind of a shocker to see that kind of play out with the contract being offered, and then almost immediately the news came with it. It was like they offered this, he declined it, now he's probably going to be traded. It all kind of came at once, and it was just kind of a hypothetical almost. Like they were like they'll hear offers, but as the next kind of days came out, it seems like he's going to be traded now.
Yeah, and at the All-Star break, he was making comments about the Nationals when asked in interviews, maybe just sensing that there wasn't very much loyalty from their side, that he wasn't really feeling the love from the Nationals because they switched up so quickly from he's never going to be traded, we're not going to trade him, to now we're hearing offers. So I think he was pretty upset about that. He ended up channeling his anger and winning the home run derby, had a fun All-Star game. But as of now, I mean, you're right, it started as we're going to hear offers, but right now it seems pretty certain he will be traded. It's just a matter of when, where, and for what. When it could either be at this deadline or this offseason or possibly even into next season. And then there's a couple other things that we need to factor in, like for what the Nationals have a certain asking price that you can get into, and then figuring it out is just where could he possibly go and who's going to trade for him.
Yeah, the consensus is for this, the return for the Nationals is probably going to be the biggest trade package in MLB history. And so their asking price right now is like 3 to 4 top of your system prospects, as well as a couple major league ready players. And it's most likely gonna, if a package does go through, it'll be 4 to 6 players with a combination of MLB ready players, guys that are contributing to teams right now, and prospects. And it's gonna be a mix of that. But I mean, yeah, it's going to be a ridiculous package, 100%, and it'll be interesting because the Nationals originally said, we're not going to be negotiating, like either meet our price or leave. And so, I mean, there hasn't been too many reports on the exact negotiations. We've heard some teams rumored to have been giving offers and what those packages might look like. But I think if this does go through, I mean, going back to the when, I think it's going to be minutes before the deadline, just because the Nationals, I mean, you want to keep Juan Soto as long as possible, and you can kind of use it as leverage. Like a couple hours before the deadline, oh, hey, Cardinals, the Yankees just offered us this, so up your offer a little bit. And so I think that's going to go deep into the night on August 2nd. When is it? The morning of August, I don't know how that.
It's normally like mid-afternoon.
Yeah, but whatever. It's gonna go very close to the deadline is my guess, just because they're gonna be using those offers as leverage. But all in all, if he does get traded, the package is going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be about, like you mentioned, 4 to 6 players. And the key with the MLB ready players is they're young and they're on controllable deals, because the Nationals want players back like they got last year in Josiah Gray and Keibert Ruiz, players that can immediately just go onto the roster for the Nationals. So you think of guys across the league like Gleyber Torres, Dylan Carlson. Those are some names that have been thrown around of the type of players that the Nationals are going for. And you get the feeling that they want those maybe more than they want the top prospects, because they still want to be able to field a team, and it's going to be a mixture of both. And for a player like Juan Soto, they can absolutely drive up that price and say, you know what, we need 3 or 4 prospects and 2 of those major league ready players, because Juan Soto is that good. I mean, we just saw him win the home run derby. He's just an incredible match of pure hitter and incredible raw power. His defense is down this year, but we've seen flashes of it in the past. He's one of the top 3 to 4 players in all of baseball. He's still 23 years old. He's controllable not only for the rest of this season, not only for the rest of the next season, but for the rest of the season after that too. So he's got 2.5 years left on his contract, so he's not a rental, which when it comes to where he's going to be traded, opens it up for a lot of teams, even the small market teams, because they can trade for him for 2.5 years, and that doesn't mean they have to pay him. And possibly by the end of that last season, they could still extend him. But a team like the Rays, who normally doesn't go after the big free agents and maybe wouldn't be willing to spend $450 million, which is probably what it's going to take to extend Soto, they can still make the trade and have him for 2.5 years, which, if they believe they're going to be in the playoffs, is 3 postseason runs. And we can get into kind of all the teams that have been, their names have been put out there and some of the favorites, but I think with that kind of deal left on Juan Soto's contract, it's open to the entire league.
Yeah, and getting into the teams that are in the mix, it's kind of the Dodgers, Padres, Yankees, and Cardinals are kind of the big 4 that we've kind of heard some news about, that it seems like if he does get traded, it's likely going to be one of those teams, but we've heard many teams. There was a report that there's as many as 13 teams involved in this. So, I mean, there's also the Giants, there's the Mets, there's the Mariners. I heard the Rays were in it as well. So, I mean, that's 8 teams that are all viable contenders for it. And, yeah, I mean, you mentioned, like, the small market teams, like, they don't even have to pay him. They could use him as a run. And maybe even the last year of his deal, maybe trade him again and get some stuff back. And it's almost like it won't be breaking even just because he won't have the same years of control, but like you'll get some stuff back for a guy that you also had a chance with for, at that point it would be half of this year, a full next year, and half another year. So two full years of a top 5 player in baseball, and maybe even flip him again. So there's a lot of teams that can do different things in order to justify getting him, whether it's giving him his $500 million deal, just having him for a couple postseason runs, or even flipping him before that happens. So there's a lot of different teams that could use him in different ways here, and you want to get into a couple of these teams?
Yeah, so really the consensus top 4, it goes the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Padres, and the Cardinals. That's in no particular order. We've seen each name rumored at the top. We've seen the Yankees, the Padres, the Cardinals, the Dodgers, all saying, different people saying that they're in the top spot, they're the main contenders. But I think right now those are the consensus top 4 in no particular order. Let's start with your Dodgers. Of course, they're in the mix. I mean, they're in the mix for every talent like this that becomes available because, I mean, realistically, they can be. They've got the payroll ability, and they also have the prospects to go out and make a trade like that. And Friedman said it's their duty to go out and at least check on players like this when they become available. They're the same thing with Mookie Betts when he was maybe going to be leaving the Red Sox, and I ended up trading for him. And then same thing last offseason with Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. We've seen it in the past with Yu Darvish and Manny Machado. They're always in the discussion. They also have the farm system to do it. Names that have been thrown around for that younger prospect mold include Bobby Miller, Andy Pajes, Miguel Vargas, Ryan Pepiot, Michael Busch. I mean, those are all prospects the Nats would be interested in. And they also have younger talent. They'd probably have to include one of, if not both, Dustin May, though, and Gavin Lux. And I think that this is the deal that I think the Dodgers will kick the tires on for sure. They're definitely going to be trying to make the push, but in the end, I'm not sure they can outlast some of the other teams with just a little bit more to offer because the Dodgers have used up a lot of it. And I think that with the payroll that they have now, adding a contract like Juan Soto possibly, and then having to pay some of their guys down the line, I think they might rather hold on to the guys they have now, especially May and Gavin Lux, and think they would definitely not make a trade that includes both. So I think the Dodgers slightly miss out on this one, but they're definitely going to be right up there till the end.
From what I've heard and also seen in the past with Andrew Friedman, he will be willing to meet this initial asking price, which depends on what that is, but they have some guys that they consider that are like not off limits, but guys they'd rather not trade, and we've seen that in the past. They held Seager, Bellinger, Lux out of deals in the past. I know the Red Sox were pushing for Gavin Lux in that Mookie Betts deal, and they've been able to keep these guys. And I mean, sometimes it means not getting the trade done, and I think that's going to end up being what happens here. I think they have the pieces to meet that initial offer, but I don't think they'll be willing to give up those guys as well as to outbid other teams if it turns into a bidding war close to the deadline. I don't see the Dodgers doing that. So I think in the end, I don't see them going to the Dodgers.
I think you're right that they can meet that initial asking price, but when you're in the last final hours of the deadline where the Nats call you back and to say, hey, the Yankees just offered up all of these prospects, now you've got to give us one more, like give us Dustin May on top of it. Maybe that's when Friedman kind of puts the brakes on. And the top of their lineup is already Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, and Freddie Freeman. And they can put that in whatever order they want. Adding Soto to that would be absolutely unreal. It would probably be one of the best top 4 in a lineup of all time. But they don't necessarily need him. And I don't think they're as desperate as some of these other teams are to make a big move like this. And I think when you're not as desperate, you're not going to be as likely to give up the names of what the Nationals are going to be calling you back and asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of where the Dodgers stand on it. And getting into the Yankees are an interesting one. They're kind of polarizing, as in they have the prospects, but it'll be interesting to see what they give up. I mean, we got Anthony Volpe. They also have Oswaldo Peraza, Alexander Vargas, Jason Dominguez, Gleyber Torres, who's the MLB ready type of guy, or has MLB experience too. And so, obviously, the Yankees fans they want Soto. They want. I mean, who wouldn't? Let's be honest. But it'll be interesting to see. Me personally, if I were GM of the Yankees, I wouldn't do this. Just because I think if you look at the makeup of the Yankees roster and farm system, you would have to give up the majority of your guys in the farm system that you see being contributors to your major league team. And you look at the rest of their team, I mean, Judge is like 29-30, Stanton's 30 plus, Garrett Cole's 30 plus, Donaldson's like 36, Rizzo's 30 plus. I mean, I could go on too. Aaron Hicks isn't exactly young either. So you look at those guys, and if you give up the farm, it's really a win now mode. And after the Stanton, the Rizzo, the Donaldson, after those guys age out, you're looking at a full rebuild again, kind of by probably around 2025. I mean, you'll get a few years of Juan Soto and your prime-ish years out of some of these guys. Judge is definitely in his prime. Some of these guys are past it seems like. So it'd be interesting to see if they want to. It'll kind of be a win now type of mode that they get into. And so it'll be interesting to see if the Yankees go that route and just say, like, hopefully we get a championship in the next 3 years of this control. And if not, I mean, regardless, they're gonna. It seems like they would have to go into a rebuild.
Yeah, there's two big things that come to my mind when talking about the Yankees in this move. The first one that I think we need to talk about is Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge has been arguably one of the best player, or arguably the best player in baseball this year, arguably the most polarizing player in baseball, and he's the best player on the best team as of right now. But he's a free agent at the end of the year. If the Yankees make the move for Juan Soto, that could spell the end of Judge's time in New York. People have already been hinting that he might be leaving in the offseason. If they trade for Juan Soto and they plan on extending him, that could mark the end for Aaron Judge. So it's kind of a, would you rather have Soto, who's 23, or Judge, who's 31? But if you're with Judge, you get to keep the homegrown name, the guy that Yankees fans have been in love with for the past couple years, who might possibly bring you a championship this year, and get to keep some of your top prospects. Or do you want to sell the farm for Soto, who, yes, is younger, is probably going to be a better player down the line, but he's a new name going into Yankee Stadium for the first time. We don't know how Yankees fans are going to love him when he's actually on the team. And you're losing out on Aaron Judge, your franchise piece that you've been playing with for the last couple of years. The second thing that I'm thinking about is the Nationals have already, it's been leaked that Anthony Volpe is their most sought-after prospect in a Juan Soto trade. Of all the guys listed at the top in offers, Anthony Volpe is the one that they like most. And when I hear that and I don't see all the people saying the Yankees are at the top of this deal, it shows me that they are hesitant to make this deal, like you said, because they are an old team. They do like Aaron Judge as well. And if they make this trade and leave and get Juan Soto, there's a chance they lose out on Judge and have their farm system depleted. If it's clear that the Nationals want Volpe the most out of everyone, that's why I'm surprised that the Yankees are not at the top of all of these trade discussions.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the mindset of, like, do we really want to do this? Like, obviously Juan Soto is. I want to say Juan Soto is worth the package he's probably gonna get in return, but is it worth it to other teams is kind of the question here, and because you at least get Juan Soto now, but is it worth it for 2 years or 2.5 years for kind of a giant question mark for the future now, just because that package is going to be so big?
Yeah, and I think that they end up making some other trades in this trade deadline, and I think that they are also hesitant because you don't want to go all in on Soto, and then the Nationals decide, nope, we're going to trade him in the offseason and see what offers we can get then, and then you've missed out on some of these other names available at the trade deadline. Ryan's been doing these great TikToks about what each team should do at the trade deadline. We're going to go out with some trade predictions on Instagram because we don't have a chance to record another episode before the deadline, but the Yankees have a lot of other options as well. In the end, I think they end up trading for Luis Castillo and not Juan Soto, and I think that means they get to hold on to Anthony Volpe, who we haven't mentioned. They love Anthony Volpe. He could, by the end of the year, be the number one prospect in all of baseball. I think they give up one of the other guys like Peraza, and they end up getting Luis Castillo, who they have for this year as well as next year. So I think that makes more sense for the Yankees, which leaves us down to the next two consensus team. And it starts with the Padres. They've got tons of prospects. Not only do they have Luis Camposano, who maybe the Nationals wouldn't be as interested in because they have Ruiz, but they've got Robert Hassel, who's flying up prospect list, as well as their 2 first-round picks from last year, James Wood and Jackson Merrill, who teams are falling in love with. They also have a very good crop of young, controllable players that I think they'd be willing to part with. C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, Trent Grisham. There's some other names in there as well. But the Padres have a lot of pieces, and as we've seen so far from the Padres over the last couple of years, they really want to get moves like this done. The only question is, can they fit a Soto extension with Tatis's big deal and Machado's big deal while having some of the other names on their team as they do right now with Eric Hosmer's contract, Blake Snell's contract, they have Yu Darvish as well. It's going to be a tough thing for A.J. Preller to figure out, but I think they're definitely in the mix because they always are.
I think this is a similar situation, it feels like to me, as the Yankees. I mean, you mentioned the contract. I was looking through when these other contracts end. Obviously, you got Machado and Tatis still long-term. Machado's probably got like 7 more years. Tatis just signed his deal. But Hosmer, he's only got like 2 or 3 more years. So, I mean, that's coming off relatively soon. But the biggest thing is that it leaves a question mark for the pitching for me for the future. I was looking at all those contracts. You got Manaea, who's a free agent after this year. Darvish, Snell, Clevenger, and Musgrove are free agents after next season. And in this trade, you'd probably be giving up Mackenzie Gore too. So that's your entire pitching staff, as well as kind of a young pitcher who's like kind of established his name in a pitching staff, that are all contracts are done by the end of next season. And also, if there's an extension, you're going to have trouble paying all those. And now that leaves the Padres as a huge question mark. And so this almost leaves them as more of a win now than even the Yankees would be if they traded for him. It would kind of be this year and next year. And after next season, I mean, there is going to be a huge hole in the rotation because you're giving up the young guys as well as 4-5 guys who are currently in your rotation right now, who will all be free agents, who you'll have to give money to some of them. And Darvish is getting up there in age. Maybe who knows what he does after that. He'll be, I think, 37 by that time. So it'll be very interesting what this team does if a Juan Soto trade does go through. And it kind of seems like it puts them in a now is their window kind of vibe. And it's just a huge question mark for the rest of the roster come after next season, 2024 and beyond.
Well, yeah, and if Musgrove keeps pitching at the level he is, he's going to get a crazy extension. He's going to get paid a lot of money, and then you're balancing a lot of big contracts. But the appeal is obviously there for the Padres, who have been so close in past years to fielding a fully competitive team. They've dealt with a couple injuries. A.J. Preller wants to get that one last piece, and Juan Soto could definitely be it. When you talk about Mookie, Trey, and Freddie Freeman, how would you feel going up against Soto, or Tatis, Soto, and Machado as a 1-2-3? Like, that's just as dangerous. The only problem is, you're right, if you lose the pitching, now you're pitching to Betts and Turner and Freeman with 1 or 2 starters and the rest of it just kind of filling out the rotation and not having a lot of money to spend in free agency unless you want to go over the luxury tax by a large margin. I think the Padres are definitely motivated to make the move. I think they're just definitely trying to figure out how to fit all of the pieces together, but it also could be one of those teams where they don't have to extend him, that they could figure out that plan when it comes down to it. They can just have the 2.5 years of him now, hope to win one World Series, and figure it out from there, either trade him or find a way to extend him and then help the pitching in the future.
That could be an option as well, and maybe you don't pay him and then like you go win now, but also keep the window to kind of go back to where you are now almost, in a sense. And the final team in this is the Cardinals, and they have lots of pieces to offer, and they're kind of viewed as maybe the top potential destination where Juan Soto can go right now. I mean, they have the prospects. You got Mason Wynn, Matthew Liberatore, Jordan Walker, and then the young pieces who are just kind of making a name for himself and this season and a little bit in the past. But Dylan Carlson, Nolan Gorman, Tyler O'Neill, Harrison Bader, Brendan Donovan. I mean, that's a lot of players to offer for the Cardinals, and it seems like they want to go after it. And you add him now, and you kind of instantly will probably become favorites in the Central. And then you talked about the other big three at the top of the order: Juan Soto, Arenado, and Goldschmidt, with a leadoff hitter in there is just as dangerous. And we think we know what Tyler O'Neill can be if they are able to keep him as well. I mean, that's a dangerous 4. And but in terms of the package, I almost am feeling like the Cardinals shouldn't do this. And it's because, I mean, all those young guys that we mentioned, with the exception of the couple prospects, it seems like this is a team that's like a couple prospects, but the majority are guys contributing right now. I mean, if you look up all those guys, I mean, those are guys that are contributing to your team right now. And if you make this trade, you might be giving up your entire starting outfield right now, and Harrison Bader, Dylan Carlson, and Tyler O'Neill. And I mean, it depends on who the asking price is, but you got 1 or 2 of those guys, as well as a Nolan Gorman. It just seems like a lot of these guys are in their starting lineup right now and contributing to the team. So for me, I think that if they're not able to kind of I'll say this: if the package is what we are expecting, then I think it's almost too much in terms of the return for the Cardinals, because the other teams that, like, all right, it leaves them a question mark for the future. But with the Cardinals, I think it's a question mark for now if you get rid of all those young players. And so it'd be interesting to see the package, but if it's what I think it will be, it's almost a no for me for the Cardinals.
No, I completely disagree. I think that they should absolutely do this because it's not going to be their entire starting outfield. I think you pick one of those guys. I think it's most likely Dylan Carlson is who the Nats have their eye on, and then you're giving up one of Brendan Donovan or Nolan Gorman. Yes, Gorman has come up and started for them, and yes, Carlson is a starter for them right now, but I think you forget, if you trade Carlson away as one of your starters, you're putting Juan Soto in his place. You're upgrading there. Yes, you lose out on Nolan Gorman, but he's spot started. They already have 3 of their 4 infield positions fully set: Goldschmidt, Tommy Edman, and Nolan Arenado at third. They just need to figure out shortstop. And I think they'd have enough money to maybe get one in free agency or shift. If they don't trade Brendan Donovan can maybe play short, or he could play second. Edman could play short. They'll figure that out. But I don't think they trade multiple of those outfielders, because you're supplementing the prospects with 1 or 2 of those pieces. If you give up Carlson and Tommy Edman, and you give up Jordan Walker, who the Nats have their eye on, he's a great prospect, Mason Wynn, and then 1 other prospect or 1 or 2 other small prospects, get to hold on to Matthew Liberatore as well. I think they should absolutely do that. Right now, I don't think that the Cardinals are a playoff team, in my opinion, but if they make the trade for Juan Soto, I'm instantly putting them in that wild card spot, and they're definitely contending for the Central. The only question it leaves me is the same question that you talked about with the Padres, but the Padres have pitching right now. The Cardinals for the last couple of years haven't. So do they sell out and make a move for another bat when they're still lacking on the pitching side? That's my one question. But of all the teams in the top 4, I think it makes the most sense for the Cardinals. I think they need it the most because they have a chance to go up and win their division. And I think they have a lot of the pieces. I'm looking out for the Cardinals. I think they can make the best package and then still have pieces left over, because they're not going to need to trade O'Neill and Carlson and Bader. I think it's one of those guys. maybe Nolan Gorman, and then some of their prospects. And I think that could get it done, and it could really boost up the Cardinals.
I agree with what you said in terms of the package you listed, it being worth it, but I think it's going to be a much bigger package than that. You said Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, Nolan Gorman, and Carlson. I
said one or two more prospects as well. Of course, you don't want to give up Liberatore. You don't want to also give up.
I think that's what it's going to look like. You say that's your ideal deal, but I don't think they're just going to be able to do that. That's 4 guys and some other throw-in prospects. I don't think that's what's going to look like for Juan Soto. I think it's going to be 5 or 6. I think closer to 6 of huge name guys that we're listing off right now, and not. I don't think this is going to include some throw-ins like we saw in the Trey Turner deal, Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, where the Dodgers also gave him, I think his name was Connor Wong, just like a throw-in catcher who he'll never be anything in the major leagues, unfortunately. But I don't think that any of those guys are going to be involved in it. I think it's going to be 5 to 6, probably 6 studs dudes who are going to be great in the major leagues.
Well, then I think even then you throw in Liberatore, there's your 5th, and then one more prospect. I'm not super familiar with the top of the Cardinals prospect list, but one more guy that's at the top of your list, I still think that's worth it for Juan Soto. I mean, I still do. They have a lot, because they're one of the younger teams in baseball. They've got a lot of their starting pieces figured out, except the starting rotation. Yadi's going to retire at the end of the year, but they've got first base figured out in Paul Goldschmidt. Second base is going to be Tommy Edmonds for a while. He could even shift over to short, have someone else play second. Third baseman, that's Nolan Arenado. He's locked in on that spot. And then you trade for Juan Soto. You have all 3 of your outfielders, and O'Neill and Bader and Juan Soto. Now you're figuring out pitching. That's the one question is, are they going to go out for a bat and maybe bootstrap themselves from improving the starting rotation? But they've got guys in the bullpen that have been pitching well this season. I don't know. I think even if you make that trade, you give up Liberatore as well, who's one of your future starters, I still think it's worth it for the Cardinals, and it would be a huge boost.
Yeah, I think it would be a huge boost, but there's also some guys that are going to have to give up, and now you're looking at if you give up one outfield spot, your outfield's fine, but then you give up a pitching Liberatore who's made starts this year. He's been pitching for them. Nolan Gorman has been their second baseman for a few months now. So you're still giving up guys that are in your starting lineup that we don't really see as much with the other teams, with the exception of a Gleyber Torres or Gavin Lux for the Dodgers. So I think for the right package, this is definitely worth it for the Cardinals, and would definitely significantly boost their World Series odds or chances to win the division, whatever you want to say is the ceiling for this team. And I think for the right package, it's more than worth it. But I think if they're not careful and they give up too much just for the getting caught up in the idea of Juan Soto, I think could leave a huge hole for the future.
Yeah, so those are just the top 4 teams. I want to throw out a couple more names as well. I think that if possible, the Mariners should go all in for this. We've seen them bring up a lot of pitching prospects this year: Matt Brash, Emerson Hancock, and George Kirby. They also have some guys at the top of the prospect list like Noelvi Marte, and they've got room for Juan Soto, and pairing him up with Julio Rodriguez would be great. Just a matter of whether they want to make that trade and then go and extend him as well. But I think Seattle could really push for being a perennial contender for the AL West by trading for Juan Soto. Of course, I want my Giants to get him. I'm not sure how realistic that is, because I don't think they have they've got some good prospects, but I don't think they have the young, controllable MLB players that would interest the Nationals, because a lot of their guys they brought up recently are platoon players, and I don't think that they're going to give up Logan Webb in a potential deal, because I think they think he's just as important as a guy like Juan Soto in the future because of just how important pitching is and in the playoffs. But it'd be great for them to make that trade, because, he's literally one of my favorite non-Giants in the league. We talk about him all the time. And then also keeping him out of the hands of National League contenders and competitors like the Dodgers and Padres, that would be great. I don't think the Mets are going to make this trade. I've never believed that the Nationals would trade him in division. I still don't. I'd be completely and utterly shocked if they trade him in the National League East. But also, give me the Orioles in the mix too. If you're going to small market teams or smaller market teams we don't see have the highest payrolls, I really want to see the Orioles put together a package and see what they can do. They're an entertaining team that I think could definitely make this move.
I think, kind of closing this out, after looking at all these packages, I almost feel like it almost might not be worth it for these teams to sell the farm for Juan Soto. And just if you look at years past in Major League Baseball, MLB is not like the NBA, where 3 stars puts you at the top of the top of contenders to win a championship. I mean, you really need a full roster to do this, and a lot of you need key players. And if you're giving up key players and future, it's almost feels like too much. I mean, we've seen Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout right now, for example. They're a 4th place team right now, and because they don't have the pieces around them, and Mike Trout's getting yes, it's sort of on the Angels as well. We've seen them have chances to do stuff, but you need to have these depth and young guys who just need to fill out your roster and be contributors. I mean, you look down just go each championship by championship in Major League Baseball in years past. There hasn't been a big 3 of just stars, and then the rest of the roster is kind of just filled out with guys. There's people contributing up and down the order, and for some teams it makes sense if you want to go win now, like the Yankees, and kind of the Padres. The Padres win now window is just a little shorter, and you're giving up some future players. But I feel like if you're giving up your immediate future and kind of your now for him, I feel like it's too much for a team like the Cardinals, and kind of the Padres fit that mold as well.
Well, I think the teams we're talking about are already built out of a lot of depth, and yes, they're giving up some young controllable pieces, but they're not completely gutting their current day roster, I think, as much as you're saying. We're not including teams that only have 1 or 2 good players that they're trading away for Juan Soto. It's a lot of teams that have good pieces, but also have surplus on top of that that's already in the major leagues. And so I don't think it's as drastic as you're giving up your entire future and you're leveraging a lot of your current thing just to have 3 good players and the rest bums. I mean, the Padres still have a fantastic pitching rotation right now. The Cardinals still have a great infield and outfield if they trade for Juan Soto. So I don't think I would go as far as that. And you're the number 1 players over prospects guy. So I think that especially for Juan Soto, who you don't need to win a World Series right now because he's 23 years old. You can form it in the future possibly, and you're having him for maybe 15 years. I don't think I agree with that line of thinking. You're right; it is a huge ask. This is going to be the biggest deal I think we've ever seen in the major leagues if he's traded. But I definitely think it's worth it for a guy like Juan Soto, whether you're trying to win now or for the future. I think it's a guy that you should absolutely be going out there for. It's a big asking price, but I think it's worth it.
If it turns into just 1 championship, it's 100% worth it. But obviously, you can't guarantee a championship at all, and so. But
it gives you if you're the Yankees, or if you're the Dodgers, or if you're the Padres or Cardinals, or teams that know they're going to be in the playoffs, having him for guaranteed 3 playoff runs, as well as then being able to maybe extend him for the next 12 years of his career, that's given you a pretty damn good shot at a World Series. It's not a guarantee, but if you already think you're going to be close, and you've seen how this guy plays in the playoffs too, it's not that's an unknown. It really vaults you up there.
Yeah. And like I said, I think it makes sense for the Yankees, and it would make sense for the Dodgers. Although I don't think the Dodgers will do it. I think they're probably the least likely out of these 4 teams. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll be surprised. It seems like something the Dodgers would do. I feel like any moment now I'm going to get a notification while recording this. Juan Soto to the Dodgers.
Well, it's our luck to record an episode. That's the motto of the Kohler Truth. Record something, and then the news comes out before we're able to put out the episode. I think that happened with the lockout, right? Where we recorded something about the lockout, and then there was no more lockout, so we had to get back on and record another episode.
Oh, and there was we were predicting after the lockout. We were predicting where free agents would go.
Yep.
I think we said Freddie Freeman back to the Braves, and then before we published it, Freddie Freeman went to the Dodgers. So. Yeah.
It was Carlos Correa. I think it was Correa. We said Correa. We both made our Correa predictions, and then he ended up going to the Twins the next morning.
But yeah, I think for the back to Juan Soto, those teams, the Yankees and Dodgers, kind of, and sort of the Padres. I think it makes sense. Just it would be justified. I mean, and I think if you get within that. If you NLCS kind of a few, just a game missing the World Series or into the World Series, I think you look back and it was it was worth the risk. We had our chance, but I feel like the Cardinals are just too far away, and I don't think the Juan Soto is just gonna put them there. And like you said, they need the pitching, and then And then they also, I mean, you're giving up one or two of those guys right now on your team. So it's kind of just, it almost feels like replacing rather than adding for the Cardinals. And I feel like that's kind of the point where it's, obviously you are adding, you are upgrading, I'll say, but you're not adding on to guys that were there and adding more depth, which I think some of these teams will do with the trade. So I think it all just depends on the package, and then obviously hindsight's 2020. If it leads to a World Series championship or just in the World Series, I think you look back, yeah, it was worth the risk. But it'll just, we'll have to wait and see on this one, and we'll see what the package looks like. We'll see what the teams do with Juan Soto from there, and it'll be fun to watch play out. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think if one thing is for sure, we just spent 30 minutes talking about one guy possibly being traded. There's going to be a great trade deadline, but Juan Soto, one of the most polarizing players that's ever come onto the market in the MLB. I mean, it's similar to what we've seen in the NFL sometimes, where it's like, how are we seeing this guy on the trade block? He's so young, he's so good. We just spent 37 minutes right now talking about Juan Soto, so it's definitely something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Whether it's worth it or not, we'll figure it out. But, I mean, Juan Soto is such a polarizing player, and it's going to be such a crazy trade deadline if he manages to get traded. We could have this discussion again in the offseason if they don't decide to move him quite yet. But good luck to all your teams if you're going after Juan Soto. It's going to take a lot, but we'll see in the next couple of days. It's about a week now until if we see if Juan Soto gets traded.